Hey, this is Mike Scheidt from YOB. Revolver has asked me to talk about my top 11 doom metal records of all time. A couple of these revolve around a little bit, but these records are really important to me. I continually return back to them, and they were instrumental in me doing what I do with YOB. One of the first bands that brought me to change the way I thought about music and vocals was Cathedral. When Lee Dorrian went from enslavement to obliteration and mentally murdered into Cathedral, I didn't get it. The switch to the extreme slower, the kind of death metal-y growl, I didn't quite get it in that context. I acquired Soul Sacrifice and Force of Equilibrium, and I went, oh my God, okay, I get it. I could say that Force of Equilibrium was the first one I got, but it wasn't the first one that really clicked for me. Soul Sacrifice was the first one that clicked. It was the riffs, certainly the sense of adventure, classic song form, but yet you didn't really know things where they were gonna go next. That was the first one with Mark Wharton on drums, but the biggest surprise and reveal really for me was Lee Dorrian singing. He'll take a moment or a vibe of a song and come up with a vocal that fits that vibe instead of just having one vocal the whole time. And there are many singers I like that have one style of vocal, they do it the whole time, so it's not right or wrong. It informed me as far as how I wanted to approach vocals, and I wanted to have that sense of dynamics and try to paint with, the 24-pack of Crayolas instead of the 6. And that carries into my second pick of an all-time favorite record, which is Cathedral, The Ethereal Mirror. That was yet the next evolution in Cathedral. You started getting into the galloping side of them. It was Soul Sacrifice expanded, and with all new things put into it. The songwriting on The Ethereal Mirror is just so progressive. They really just climbed into things that I listen to it and I'm still blown away by it. The song, Enter the Worms, that song alone, it's just so great. So when I got into Cathedral, I joined the Cathedral Coven fan club. And part of that fan club was you were sent Lee Dorrian's fanzine, which was called Reflections of Doom. And that's where I first heard of a lot of bands. But Electric Wizard, for the Doom side of things, really struck me. For me, where it really, really clicked was Super Coven. And that was my first introduction to long form. The songs were stretching out past the 10-minute mark. You would have one riff happening that was hypnotic, the tones, the kind of loose attitude, dark, pungent riffing. Just Osborne's vocals just emitted everything that they wrote about. So it just felt like everything was sticking the landing. And I've listened to that album countless times. And probably one of the highest moments I've ever seen in live music was watching Electric Wizard play Super Coven live. And then from there, that carries into my another of my 11, which is Dopethrone. Dopethrone is a slightly more refined Electric Wizard, but it's still just ugly and loose and iconic tone. Everybody knows that tone. A lot of people want that tone. There's not a weak moment on the whole record. I can still listen to it. It still takes me back to what it felt like to be discovering these bands in this style of heavy for the first time as it was happening in real time. Those records will always be in my listening. I'll return to them at least every few months. There's Cathedral, Electric Wizard, and Sleep's Holy Mountain. There was something about Sleep's Holy Mountain that was punk. I think around that time, I could be wrong, but I think around that time, and we're really listening to a lot of Black Sabbath, and particularly Volume 4. And they just took their upbringing and their punk roots and the classic rock they were into and funneled it into something that was, heavily THC induced and it was kind of an introduction to me of like gear worship. And when you watch the Dragonaut video and you see them showing all their gear, and it was just part of a vibe and a presence, the whole mystique of it. But also the songs are just so endlessly catchy. Some of the first music my kids heard was Sleep, Dragonaut. And it's killer to see that record, and their being a band today is just so celebrated. It's correct. The other record that I would say in that circle in my 11, so again, Cathedral, Electric Wizard, Sleep, and then Burning Witch. And I'm talking about, in particular, Crippled Lucifer, and the original version of it, which is 2 EPs. And that was the most caustic, inspired, kind of drug-addled, but in a totally different way than Electric Wizard. And along with Lee Dorian, Edgy 59, and the way that he approached vocals was really important to my evolution. Being able to sing really clean and like beautiful over this really broken music. And then also just hit these screeches and screams that came from somewhere that felt very real. The way that they would hit riffs and almost like suck the air out of the room. It was so heavy and patient, like their slow riffs are so, they have that extra breath before it finally hits. And this, Stephen O'Malley's tone, what he was playing, I mean, that was brand new to me. So in the category of like that kind of blower heavy, dark, oppressive doom, the other one that I return to over and over again is Corrupted, Passo Inferior. They're from Japan. I think the album came out in the mid to late 90s. It starts out with just walls of feedback and things just fading in. And it's really just becomes hypnotic. And when that first riff finally hits and you hear drums, bass, guitar, and those first roars, it's so oppressive and dark and claustrophobic. And for 45 minutes, that one song does not let up. I don't know, I mean, there's a lot of very heavy bands that get into those waters, but for me, I don't know if anyone does it better than Corrupted. They have a really interesting spirit about them. They don't do interviews. They don't do professional photos. They never have. I don't think they ever will. They say that anything you need to know about them is in their music and in their lyrics, most of which is in Spanish, not all, but most. Again, one-of-a-kind band, Passo Inferior, one-of-a-kind record. To kind of get into more of like, I mean, I guess you could say Holy Mountain is this, but to get a little more into the stoner side, when Man's Ruin was happening, it was just such a revelation. They were just putting out album after album after album after album. It just seemed like this inspired moment of just constant offerings. They had such a quality in general, but in my top 11 is certainly Acid King, Bussy Woods. It's so straightforward and simple, and yet it's not. The way Laurie plays and sings, and Joey Osborne on drums, and the way Joey would just swing those beats. He's kind of like a Ginger Baker of doom. He's busy, but yet somehow there's still all this space in the riff. Laurie's singing and the way she plays guitars and just the way she is, it's just so legit. It just comes out in the music. It's so undeniable. I instantly connected to that record. As soon as I could have a smartphone that held music, it's one of the first things I snagged, and it's been on there ever since. And anytime I get a new phone, it goes to the next one. As well as record, CD, any way that I can have it. I love that record. Another in my 11 that also came, from Man's Ruin, and a band that I don't hear enough people talk about. They only had one record, and the band is Operator Generator, and the album's called Polar Fleet. When you talk about like High on Fire, to me, Operator Generator is like the stoner version of High on Fire. At least in the early days of High on Fire, you have just this really bombastic wall of riffs coming at you, like this relentless wall of riffs and ideas, and that kind of punch and presence, but it's more psychedelic and syrupy. Mitchell, their singer, just has this soaring, clean vocal that just cuts through and has so much vibe. Tom Choi is really an amazing guitarist and just endlessly inventive. They punish on some parts, it grooves on other parts, it goes completely psychedelic on other parts, but it hits also like punk in a way, not necessarily in downbeat, but just in the ferocity of it. It really is, again, just like a one-of-a-kind record, and I'm just surprised that more people don't know about them, or I don't hear them name dropped more, because to me, they're one of the bands, and they were hugely influential on how we approached some music in some of our own songs. Kind of more on the epic side of it, maybe call it traditional doom or whatever. There's a band called Solstice, and they did an album called A New Dark Age. It kind of, parts of it struck me like, okay, if you take Iron Maiden, down tune it, and then make it slower, it kind of has that feel a little bit. It's very well recorded, very well played, a great grouping of songs. They have really cool interludes that are ambient and fun to listen to. There's one song in particular on that record called Hammer of Damnation. And it's just such a soaring, perfect song. It's so great when you discover like a perfect song, a perfect song for you, however you want to define that. Their lead singer has this incredible mid-range vocal that seems effortless. It's not operatic, but it's not like rock and roll. It's in this weird middle ground. But on that song, they have two different sections of vocals where there's also like a baritone singer. And so the main singer, and then there's a baritone vocal happening at the same time. But I'm talking baritone like Gregorian chants or like a Baroque kind of counterpoint. That may not be technically accurate, but it just feels like a church choir sort of thing. But that baritone vocal, they stick the landing so perfectly. It really informed me starting to sing lower in some of YOB stuff because I just love it so much. I've listened to that song like on repeat. Solstice has a number of records and they're all great. There's something about New Dark Age that hits all these buttons for me that, again, I come back to it over and over again. The last one on my list is High on Fire, Art of Self-Defense. I don't know that it's doom. I don't even know that it's really stoner necessarily, but they are cut from that cloth somehow. And they particularly, it's metal and it's lots of really cool, punishing, Motorhead roll-esque qualities to it. When Art of Self-Defense came out, Sleep had disbanded, and it was, what I knew about it was Matt's new band. And I don't know what I was expecting. I thought maybe it was going to be Sleep-like. And sure, some of the tone and solos, yeah, you get that. But High on Fire was its own animal, and a pummeling, crushing one. It took me a couple listens to wrap my head around it, but when it clicked with me and I got it, you go however many years later after that record and you can see why they're so celebrated and heralded as being one of the best heavy bands, not just in this genre, but probably period in history. I can listen to that record on repeat. It stuck with me all these years. It was hugely influential on how I played guitar, hugely influential on a lot of bands. So Art of Self-Defense is a part of history to me, and I think it's part of history, period. So those are my choices, and pretty hard to whittle it down to 11, because like I said before, there are countless doom metal records that have been really important to me and are important to me. I'd be curious to know what yours are. It's such a wide range of music to talk about and discuss and celebrate. So share some of your thoughts on what you love.